Get the very latest on what's happening in Ukraine now. Let's bring in France 24's Wassim Cornet. Wassim, let's start with Mariupol. That's been under siege for 2 weeks now. What's the latest from there?
Yeah, starting in Mariupol, but starting with some good news for a change. A senior Ukrainian official says about 20,000 people were able to leave the city on Tuesday. They were able to leave the city in their own cars, driving along this humanitarian corridor that was agreed on with Russian forces. But this afternoon, there was still uncertainty about whether that corridor would be able to remain open this Wednesday. The Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine saying that that was an open question for now. Inside the city, as you mentioned, the situation remains dire, if not catastrophic. There are still hundreds of thousands of people still trapped in Mariupol. And we've talked about this before. The city is without water, without heating, and in some areas without power. And obviously it's still winter, and especially in that part of the world. So you can just imagine what the situation is like in the city. And of course, they're also running out of food because aid is not being allowed in. We've also heard from the deputy mayor of Mariupol that talked to us about this incident that happened yesterday. Russian troops taking over a hospital and holding hostage about 400 doctors and patients. And according to local residents and people who did manage to escape from the building, apparently Russian troops are actually shooting from inside the building. But even we started by saying that about 20,000 people had escaped the city. Even those who did manage to escape, unfortunately, they're not always completely out of the woods just yet. A few hundred residents of Mariupol were able to make their way to the town of Zaporizhia. And of course, if that name sounds familiar, that is the site of the nuclear power plant, which was attacked by Russian troops 2 weeks ago. For the first time, civilian targets inside that city were hit by Russian airstrike. Let's show you on the map if we can bring that up real quick. To the northeast, the city's botanical garden, that venue is obviously closed right now. But more concerning is the fact that the train station was actually hit by several rockets. I don't know if we can bring that map. That would, yeah, all right, it's coming up right now. The more concerning, of course, that the fact that the train station was hit by several rockets. That is a location where refugees are either arriving or taking shelter. A witness reports saying that the windows were blown out during those strikes, but thankfully there were no casualties.
All right, let's go now to the capital, Kyiv, where there was also shelling this morning. The city's under a curfew now until tomorrow. What's the situation like inside Kyiv?
That's right, a 35-hour curfew which began at 8 o'clock yesterday evening and will end at 7 tomorrow morning. And that is because Ukrainian authorities anticipated that this particular time frame would be very difficult in terms of difficult and dangerous in terms of airstrikes. This morning, a 12-story apartment block was hit by a missile in Kyiv. 2 people were injured. 37 were evacuated from that building. And a little side note, if you just picture a 12-story building, you just hear less than 40 people were inside. That just tells you how many people have actually left the capital. If we look at the big picture, let's bring up the second map. You see that there's been shelling in other areas too, Dnipro and Rivne, among others. It really appears that Russia's goal is to have their troops advance on the town of Dnipro, from the south and the east, which would explain the heavy shelling that we've been seeing there over the past few days. And it's a similar situation to the southeast of there in the city of Mykolaiv, where there has also been heavy shelling, and we assume that Russian troops are trying to gain control of that city too. But by and large, there hasn't been much change since yesterday's map, and that is really the main takeaway from numerous sources and intelligence assessments. According to the British Armed Forces, Russian troops are really having a hard time overcoming the challenges that are posed by local terrain. They're having to focus on the main roads in their advance toward key cities, and that, of course, is making them an easy target for Ukrainian forces. And again, we've talked about this before, but Russian troops have been hit by supply shortages, and especially including ammunition, in particular for troops that are trying to take over the city of Kharkiv toward the northeast of the country. If you remember, Jeannie, the day after the Russian invasion began, Western countries were saying, listen, Kyiv might fall within 1 to 4 days. It's day 21, and the capital of Ukraine is still in Ukrainian hands.
All right, Wassim, thanks for that. France 24's Wassim Cornet.